Hi guys. Tonight we begin not in a castle, but in the silent pre-dawn dark of a Victorian slum. Your blanket is thin, the air is damp, but the thing that truly wakes you isn't the cold. It's the deep, hollow ache in your stomach, a sharp, familiar grip just below your ribs. It's 5 a.m, and your body is already calculating the day's first and most pressing problem: food. From history books, the Industrial Revolution looks like steam trains and iron bridges, a grand tale of progress. But for the millions who fueled it, the story was written here, in the cramped space between hunger and the next scant meal. The reality is simple. For the Victorian poor, food wasn't about culture or pleasure. It was the daily mathematics of survival. And if you had to feed a family on a labourer's wage, with bread that was often half chalk, meat that was a weekly rumour, and tea that was little more than brown dust, you'd discover quickly that your biggest enemy wasn't the overseer or the landlord. It was the relentless, grinding calculus of an empty cupboard. You wouldn't last a week, not without learning the hidden rules of this desperate game. So, before you settle in, if you're ready to step beyond the history books and into the true gritty reality of what it meant to put food on the table in the Age of Empire, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you find this deep dive into the past valuable. And if you're listening right now, I'd love to know. Post your location and the local time in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see where in the world we're gathering to explore these hidden stories together. The day does not begin with light or sound or the gentle stirring of consciousness. It begins in the dark with a familiar hollow ache, a tight, insistent knot just below your ribs that pulses with your heartbeat. This is your first and most faithful companion each morning: hunger. It is not the pang of someone who skipped supper. It is the deep, systemic emptiness of a body that was never properly filled the day before. You're already calculating before your eyes are open. The mental arithmetic of survival starts in this bed, in this crowded room where the air is thick with the sleep of too many bodies. Asterisk, the bread. How much is left? The tea caddy. Is it empty? Did the price of bacon rise again last market day? Your mind, still fogged with weariness, becomes a ledger of scarcity. Across the city in bedrooms with the curtains drawn against the encroaching dawn, a different kind of waking occurs. There, the first thought might be of which waistcoat to wear, or what letters await. There, the stomach's demand is a mild, anticipated whisper, soon to be answered by the clatter of fine china and the smell of kidneys frying in butter, of eggs gathered warm from a country estate. Here, in the rented silence of the poor, the stomach's demand is a shout, a creditor pounding at the door of your consciousness. Food is not the first pleasure of the day. It is the central problem, the limited capital with which you must negotiate the next 14 hours of existence. You rise, your movements careful not to disturb the others, though the floorboards creak a protest. The heart of the home, such as it is not a welcoming parlour or a warm dining room. It is the kitchen, a term that grants it a dignity it barely possesses. In truth, it is a corner of the single room dominated by a small, cold fireplace. This is your command centre. Your arsenal is pitifully small. A blackened kettle sits on the hob. A single large pot, its bottom thin from years of direct flame, waits for its daily duty. A few chipped earthenware bowls, a couple of tin spoons, a knife gone dull at the edge. On a shelf the meagre stores are arranged with a sort of desperate reverence. A linen bag holding perhaps a pound of flour, a smaller one with coarse tea, a blue paper cone of sugar, a ceramic jar with a precious few inches of dripping, a half loaf of bread wrapped in cloth. This is not a pantry for creating meals. This is a laboratory for the alchemy of necessity. Here the goal is not flavour, presentation, or even variety. The sole objective is transformation. You must turn these scant, often poor quality materials, hard grains, fibrous root vegetables, tough cuts of meat, cheap tea dust, into usable energy. This is not cooking as an art. It is cooking as a chemical war waged against inedibility, a daily battle to convert the cheapest substances available into the calories that will keep your family's hearts beating beating and limbs moving. Every action here, from lighting the fire to stirring the pot, is a tactical manoeuvre in the campaign of the day. The fire, once coaxed to a feeble smoking life, is for boiling water first. The tea is not a luxury, it is a medicinal ritual, a stimulant to shock the system awake. You measure the dark leaves with a frugality born of long practice, using the same portion 3, sometimes 4 times, until the water runs clear and flavourless. The resulting liquid in your cup is the colour of weak rust, hot and slightly bitter. The bread, yesterday's or the day before's, is hard. You might soften a piece of it in the hot tea, letting it become a warm, soggy mass that is easier to swallow. Or you might simply chew it slowly, washing each mouthful down with the faintly tannic brew. For the man of the house, if he's a labourer heading to the docks or the building site, this is his fuel. This is not breakfast. It is the lighting of a very short, very damp fuse. The few simple carbohydrates from the bread and the sharp caffeine from the tea are a calculated trick, a psychological and physiological sleight of hand meant to convince his stomach and his mind that sustenance has arrived, buying a precious 2 or 3 hours before the true, grinding hunger returns with a vengeance. He eats standing up, often in his coat, his eyes already on the door. There is no conversation, no lingering. The taste is irrelevant. The function is everything. As he leaves, the steam from his cup hanging in the cold air for a moment before vanishing, he carries that hollow feeling with him into the grey dawn. The war for calories has begun, and he marches out with his reserves already critically depleted. The rest of you are left with the quiet of the room, the dying fire, and the profound, weighty knowledge that every single scrap left in the cupboard must now be strategized, stretched, and engineered to see you all through until he returns, hopefully with the day's wages in his pocket, ready to start the calculation anew. At the absolute, non-negotiable centre of this world of want stands the loaf. It is not the object we picture today, golden-crusted and airy. This is the ***, staff of life. *** in its most literal, brutal sense. It is a dense, formidable brick of sustenance, weighing a regulation 4 pounds, its crust a deep, uniform brown verging on black in places from the fierce heat of commercial ovens. To hold one is to feel its heft, its solidity. This is not food that invites, it commands respect and demands work. The first thing that strikes you is its colour. The flour within is not the fine, snowy white reserved for the tables of the rich. It is a dull, greyish beige, milled from the entirety of the wheat kernel, the bran and germ included, which gives it a coarse, gritty texture. But even this wholemeal honesty is often a lie. To stretch the expensive wheat flour, bakers, particularly those servicing the poorest districts, would add seconds or filler. Dried ground peas or beans were common, adding a faintly sour, earthy taste and a leaden quality. Potato flour, another cheap extender, could make the bread damp and clammy if used in excess. And then there were the outright adulterants, a handful of chalk dust or alum to whiten the appearance, a dose of plaster of Paris to add weight. You did not buy nourishment, you bought bulk. Your teeth might grit on an unexpected stony fragment. Your tongue might detect a suspicious chemical aftertaste beneath the predominant flavour of fermentation and heat. This loaf was the fundamental unit of economic and social life. A man's wage was often discussed in terms of how many loaves it could buy. A family's stability was measured by the presence of a whole uncut loaf on the shelf. To earn one's bread was to survive. To have bread was to have a claim on the next day. It was so central that its absence meant catastrophe. The cry of bread or blood was not metaphorical, but a direct statement of the equation between sustenance and revolution. Nutritionally, this dark bread was a paradox. In its purest, unadulterated form, the whole grain provided roughage, some B vitamins and minerals that the refined white bread of the wealthy lacked. It was, in theory, healthier. but the adulterant stole what little goodness it had. Alum could cause constipation and stomach cramps. Chalk and plaster contributed nothing but the danger of intestinal blockages and malnutrition, as they provided a false sense of fullness without calories. The poor were thus trapped. The very substance that was meant to sustain them was often laced with agents that slowly undermined their health, making them weaker, more susceptible to the diseases that flourished in the crowded slums. The ritual of its consumption was a study in precision and economy. The loaf was not sliced, it was hacked with a heavy knife, the thickness of each piece a careful calculation of who needed the most energy for the day's labour. It was rarely eaten alone. It was the canvas, the spoon, the plate. A thick slab would be piled with a smear of dripping or a scrape of butter if the household could afford it. More often, it was used to sop up the last traces of thin soup or gravy, absorbing every possible calorie and fragment of flavour. Stale bread, rock hard after a few days, was not thrown away. It was resurrected. Grated into breadcrumbs, it would be used to bulk out meat puddings or as a topping. Soaked in water or milk, it formed the base of a filling for a baked pudding. In its final stage, completely inedible, it might be dried in the oven and used as a primitive coffee substitute or thickener. Every molecule was forced to yield value. The contrast with the bread of the affluent was a daily silent lesson in the hierarchy of existence. Their bread was a snow-white, feather-light roll or a finely sliced loaf of crustless pain de mie, served in a silver rack, accompanying a meal, not constituting it. Its whiteness was a symbol of purity, refinement, and distance from the dirty processes of life. It was designed to melt on the tongue, not to challenge the jaw. To eat the dark, gritty loaf of the poor was to taste the very earth of the struggle, to feel the labour of digestion mirror the labour of living. It was a food that fought back, demanding effort for every calorie it yielded, a constant, chewy reminder of the hard, unyielding nature of the world you inhabited. If the loaf was the immutable pillar of existence, the soup pot was its beating heart, its ever-present, simmering soul. In a home with no larder to speak of, the concept of a discrete meal was a luxury. Instead, there was the asterisk, pot asterisk. A large, heavy, blackened cauldron of cast iron or thick ceramic, it lived in a state of near permanent occupation on the hob or at the edge of the hearth. Its fire was never allowed to die completely. Banked coals kept its contents in a state of perpetual slow transformation. This was not a vessel for cooking in the modern sense, but a digestive organ for the household itself, a communal stomach that broke down and amalgamated everything the family could scavenge or afford. The soup within was a living entity, changing day by day, week by week, but never ever being entirely finished. Today's dinner was merely a withdrawal from the perpetual fund. The base of this eternal broth was, and always would be, bone. A knuckle bone from a sheep begged from the butcher with a look of practised need. The cleaned carcass of a single scrawny chicken, boiled until every shred of flavour and gelatin surrendered. These bones were boiled and reboiled until they grew soft and porous, their marrow sucked into the liquid, giving it a faint milky opacity and a precious film of fat on the surface. Into this simmering foundation went the vegetables of the poor, chosen for their hardiness, cheapness, and filling quality. The turnip, or swede, was a constant, a dense, yellow-fleshed root that broke down into soft, sweet chunks, thickening the broth. Onions, their papery skins adding colour, provided a foundational sweetness. Potatoes, if they could be had, lent body and vital starch. Cabbage leaves, the outer ones too tough for sale, were chopped fine. This was not a recipe, it was a process of accretion. The pea and bread crustings from yesterday's plate into the pot. The few fibrous leaves of celery from the market stall's discard pile into the pot. The rind of the Sunday bacon, chewy and salty, boiled until tender, then chopped fine and returned. A handful of barley, bought by the ounce, would swell and thicken. The resulting concoction was a thick, hearty, mud-coloured gruel more than a soup as we know it. It was a calorie-dense slurry, designed to fill the stomach and warm the body from the inside out. Its flavour was deep, earthy and complex, a testament not to culinary skill, but to time and necessity, the slow alchemy of poverty that could make something vaguely sustaining from almost nothing. Its role was paramount. For children, the elderly, and those doing less strenuous work, this pottage, ladled over a hunk of the dark bread, was the main source of nutrition for most days of the week. It provided hot liquid, a sense of fullness, and a slow-burning energy from its starches and trace fats. The bones leached minerals like calcium and phosphorus into the broth, offering a crude, unquantified defence against the rickets that bent the limbs of so many slum children. The variety of scraps, however meagre, offered a wider range of vitamins than a diet of bread alone. It was the ultimate social food. The pot sat in the centre of the home, and its contents were shared equally, a daily ritual of ladling that reinforced the family unit. Its constant presence was a psychological comfort. As long as the fire burned and the pot simmered, catastrophe was held at bay. It represented the mother's tireless invisible labour, her skill in procuring scraps, her vigilance in tending the flame, her quiet determination to keep the life of the family literally bubbling along. To be invited to share from someone's pot was a sign of deep trust and intimacy in these communities. Yet, for all its communal virtue, the soup pot was also a gauge of desperation. The colour and clarity of the broth told a story. A rich, cloudy, meat-flecked soup meant a recent good fortune, a Sunday joint perhaps. A thin, watery pale liquid, where a single turnip piece might be chased around with a spoon, spoke of a week stretched too far, of wages spent or work lost. The eternal stew was a brilliant adaptation, but it was born of a profound precariousness. It stood in stark, silent contrast to the clear consommé served in fine china at the wealthy man's table, a delicate, refined distillation of essence, designed to stimulate the palate, not silence the gut. One pot was a life support system. The other was an ornament. In the grim calculus of survival, there existed a separate, vital column in the mental ledger, not for nourishment, but for sensation. 3 substances, tea, sugar, and gin, formed a holy trinity of solace and stimulation, each a tiny burning aperture of relief in the grey monotony of want. They were economic vampires, draining precious pennies from the food budget, yet their purchase was defended with a desperation that spoke to a need far deeper than the physical. Te was the first and most sacred ritual. It was not the delicate china leaf of the drawing room, but a coarse black dust, often sweepings from warehouse floors, sold by the ounce in paper twists. Its preparation was a moment of solemn pause. For the exhausted housewife, after the men had left for work and the children were momentarily quiet, the act of boiling the kettle and measuring out the precious grains was a reclaiming of self. The few minutes spent waiting for it to draw were perhaps the only ones in her day that were entirely unquestionably her own. She did not sit in a parlour. She might stand by the hearth or lean against the scrubbed table, but in that posture, cradling the thick, warm mug in work-roughened hands, breathing in the steam that carried a faint, smoky aroma, she was momentarily more than a drudge. The hot liquid, bitter and strong, was a stimulant that sharpened her mind for the day's endless tasks, but its true value was psychological. It was a moment of heated quietude a tiny island of personal ceremony in an ocean of obligation. For the cost of a farthing, it offered a semblance of domestic peace and a fleeting sense of control. Sugar, the companion to tea, was its own kind of magic. A hard, conical loaf, wrapped in dark blue paper, it was a luxury rendered necessary. A small lump, crushed between tongs or shaved with a knife, transformed the bitter tea into a sweet, energizing cordial. This was its primary practical function, a bolt of instant, cheap calories. For a labourer feeling faint, a lump of sugar dissolved on the tongue could provide a jolt to stave off collapse. But its power went beyond the metabolic. In a world devoid of pleasure, where every taste was utilitarian, starchy, fatty, salty, the pure, crystalline sweetness of sugar was a shock to the system, a direct line to a sensation of joy. For children, a rare taste of it was a event. It represented a break from the relentless savoury monotony, a proof that delight could still exist. This made it economically treacherous. The craving for this minute, affordable happiness could pull pennies away from more nutritious, bland foods like cheese or an extra egg. Families would go without meat to keep their tea sweetened, choosing the immediate psychological lift over slower bodily repair. Sugar was the opiate of the masses, not because it drugged them, but because it sweetened a bitter reality just enough to make it swallowable. Then there was asterisk, gin, asterisk. If tea was solace and sugar was joy, gin was oblivion. Cheap, potent and readily available from every other storefront in the poorer districts, it was known as mother's ruin for a reason. For a few pence, a woman could purchase not just a drink, but a temporary annihilation of her circumstances. The numbing fire of raw spirit offered an escape from the damp chill of the room, the constant gnawing anxiety over money, the cries of hungry children, the ache in every muscle. In the harsh flickering light of a gin shop, she could be, for an hour, nobody's mother, nobody's wife. Just a being momentarily free of feeling. The economic trap was vicious and immediate. The pennies spent on gin were not just diverted from food, they were incinerated, yielding nothing but a few hours of borrowed numbness and a deeper thirst. It could unravel a week's careful budgeting in a single night, plunging a family from precarious stability into destitution. Yet, to judge its consumers harshly is to miss the point. Gin was not a vice of character, but a logical, if catastrophic, response to an unbearable environment. When reality offers nothing but unending pressure, the promise of a valve, however destructive, becomes a compelling necessity. It was the negative image of the tea ritual. Both were pauses, but one offered a moment of conscious quiet, the other a desperate flight from consciousness itself. Together, these three substances formed a perilous ecosystem of coping. Tea provided the daily small dignity. Sugar offered the occasional cheap thrill. Gin sold the dangerous dream of total respite. Each in their own way addressed a hunger that bread and soup could not touch. The hunger for a moment's peace, for a spark of pleasure, for a respite from the self. They were proof that the human spirit, when starved of all other comforts, will spend its last coin not just to feed the body, but to medicate the mind. The tragedy was that the very system that created this profound need for comfort also commodified it, ensuring that the poor's search for momentary relief became one of the most reliable ways to keep them poor. Protein was a spectre that haunted the working-class diet, a presence felt more in its absence than its consumption. It was not the centerpiece of a meal, but a fleeting ghost of flavour, a scarce resource to be deployed with strategic precision. The concept of a cut of meat, a chop, a steak, a joint of prime roast belonged to another universe. Here, meat came in forms that spoke of utility, preservation, and the utilisation of every last part of the animal the wealthy had no use for. The most common incarnation was preserved, salted, or smoked. A slab of bacon was the cornerstone of this category. It was not the lean pink rasher we know, but a thick fatty piece streaked with muscle and crowned with a tough, salty rind. It was a treasure chest of uses. Thin slices, fried until they curled and rendered their precious fat, could flavour a pot of beans or be laid upon bread for a rare, rich treat. The rendered fat itself was collected in a jar, becoming dripping, the primary cooking medium, and spread for bread. The rind, boiled for hours, would soften and be chopped into the eternal soup, imparting a deep, smoky saltiness. Tripe, the stomach lining of cows, was a pale, spongy, faintly odorous commodity sold cleaned and parboiled. It required long, slow simmering with onions and milk to become tender, emerging as a bland, gelatinous substance valued more for its cheap protein and filling texture than any gustatory pleasure. Asterisk, asterisk. Trotters asterisk, asterisk. Pig's feet, and asterisk asterisk. Shin bones asterisk asterisk were bought for the gelatin and minute shreds of meat that clung to them, destined for the stock pot. These were not foods of desire, but of biochemical necessity, vehicles for fats, proteins and minerals that the starch-heavy diet otherwise lacked. The other primary source was the market's final hour. As respectable housewives completed their shopping, the butchers' and fishmongers' slabs held the remnants, scraps of meat trimmed from larger cuts, offal that hadn't sold, small fish that were starting to lose their brightness. This was where the poor shopped, haggling for a penny's worth of pieces. These bits might be folded into a sweet pudding with plenty of onion and filler, stretched across a family in a form where the meat was a surprise rather than a promise. A single bruised mackerel or a few small herrings could be fried and flaked into a potato cake. This was protein as a rumour, a hint whispered through a mouthful of potato and flour. This made the asterisk asterisk Sunday roast asterisk asterisk not merely a meal, but the pivotal economic and emotional event of the week. It was an institution, a sacred expenditure. The joint was small, a cheap cut of beef like brisket or a piece of mutton, and its purchase often dictated the rest of the week's budget. The act of roasting filled the cramped dwelling with an aroma of such profound, savoury richness it felt like a physical blessing, a temporary transformation of the very air. The meal itself was a ceremony of order and portioning. The father, as breadwinner, received the best slice. The children got smaller pieces. The mother often took the ends or the bits that clung to the bone. The taste was monumental, hot, savoury, fatty, a shocking departure from the week's monotony. It was a taste of dignity, of participation in a national ritual, however scaled down. The most public and humbling form of foraging happened in the very heart of commerce, the marketplace at closing time. As the stalls were packed away, the ground was littered with the day's rejects, bruised apples, their brown spots soft to the touch, wilted cabbage leaves torn from the heads and discarded, carrots too twisted for sale, potatoes with deep eyes cut out by the vendor. For children and women, this was the final harvest. You had to be swift, competing with others in the same plight, and you had to be inconspicuous, avoiding the scornful gaze of the stallholders or the beat constable who might move you on for causing an obstruction. There was no triumph in this gathering, only a grinding necessity. The produce was often of poor quality, requiring meticulous cleaning and trimming. Yet, in the hands of a skilled cook, these discards could be revived. The soft fruit went into a steamed pudding or was stewed into a tart paste. The vegetables were chopped finely for soup. Nothing was wasted because nothing could be. This practice was a daily lesson in the hierarchy of consumption. You were eating what the market had deemed unfit for those who could pay. It was nutrition filtered through the sieve of commerce and collected from the dirt. Yet, in the communal misery, there was sometimes a brittle solidarity, a silent agreement among the gatherers not to crowd one another too much, a shared glance that acknowledged the mutual fall from grace. This urban foraging, born of absolute need, painted a vivid picture of resilience. It showed a population using every shred of knowledge, every ounce of courage, and every last tolerance for humiliation to patch together the caloric deficit of their official diets. They were not passive recipients of starvation. They were active, if desperate agents in their own survival, scouring the man-made and lingering natural world for the fragments that would allow them to see another week. While the poor conducted their daily chemistry of survival over a single flame, another world existed in the terraced houses and suburban villas where a different kind of fire burned, the fire of asterisk asterisk, aspirational propriety ***. For the Victorian middle class, the merchants, clerks, solicitors and successful shopkeepers, food was not merely fuel. It was a relentless tri-daily performance of stability, morality and hard-won status. Theirs was a universe governed by the clock and the rulebook, where meals were not responses to hunger, but affirmations of a place in the social firmament. The day began not with a gnawing void, but with the confident, fragrant sizzle of a ***, substantial breakfast ***. This was a meal that announced a household with resources and orderly domestic management. The table would be laid with a certain crispness, a white cloth, individual place settings, perhaps a small vase of flowers. The centrepiece was the sideboard, bearing covered dishes kept warm over spirit lamps. Here lay the theatre of morning sustenance, rashers of bacon, properly lean and curling at the edges, eggs fried or scrambled in butter, plump pork sausages, kidneys simmered in a rich brown gravy. There was toast, made from a fine white loaf, kept warm in a silver rack, accompanied by porcelain pots of marmalade and fresh butter. Coffee or tea, of a quality that actually bore the name of its region, like Kongu or Assam, was served from a polished pot. This meal was a declaration. It said the man of the house engaged in mental, not manual, labour, and required good sustenance to fuel his discernment. It said the woman of the house commanded a well-run kitchen with a competent servant or two. It was eaten with a measured pace, the morning newspaper propped against the coffee pot discussing the day's plans. The hunger it satisfied was secondary to the statement it made. ***. We are regular, we are provided for, we are civilized. Lunch, or luncheon, was often a lighter, more feminine affair, especially if the men were at their places of business. It might consist of cold meats left from the previous night's dinner, a slice of ham, some chicken, arranged on a platter with pickles and chutney. A salad of lettuce and cucumber dressed with oil and vinegar spoke of an interest in delicate digestion. There might be a simple pudding, like a baked apple or a slice of sponge cake. This was not the heavy, stodgy fuel of the labourer, but a refined pause. For the children and the mistress of the house, it was a moment of quiet repast, often in the breakfast room or a sunlit parlour, reinforcing the separation of the home's gendered and generational spheres. The very lightness of the meal was a luxury, implying that a large, calorie-dense midday dish was the mark of a working-class need, not a middle-class preference. Then, in the late afternoon, came the most iconic and socially charged ritual of all. ***, afternoon tea, ***. This was not the desperate, tannic infusion of the slums. This was a ceremony of porcelain and gossip, a performance of leisure that defined the class. The drawing room would be arranged just so. A tiered stand would display its edible jewels, thin, crustless sandwiches of cucumber or egg and cress, warm, buttery scones with clotted cream and jam, delicate pastries and fruit cake. The tea itself was brewed in a silver or fine china pot, using loose leaves measured from a caddy, the water at a precise temperature. It was poured by the mistress of the house, a ritual of hospitality and control. This meal had almost no nutritional necessity. Its purpose was purely social and symbolic. It was a display of cultivated taste and spare time. It was where marriages were subtly negotiated, alliances formed, and social standing constantly assessed through the quality of the cake and the fineness of the china. The ritual said, ***, we have the time for this. We have the refinement to appreciate it. We belong. The day culminated in ***, dinner ***, the most formal and didactic of the meals, served later in the evening, often after a change of dress. It was a multi-course journey through a carefully curated landscape of abundance. A soup course, clear, not thick and peasant-like, would be followed by a fish course. Then, the main event, a joint of roast beef or leg of lamb accompanied by multiple vegetables cooked separately, buttered carrots, minted peas, roast potatoes, and gravies made from proper stocks. Following this, a pudding, a trifle, a fruit tart, a moulded blancmange would cleanse the palate. Finally, a tray of dessert, nuts, fruits, candies, and port wine for the gentleman. The order was sacrosanct, a culinary liturgy. Each course was served and cleared by a servant, the silent ballet of domestic labour that made the performance possible. Conversation followed strict rules, avoiding vulgar topics like money or politics in mixed company. This meal was the daily anchor of middle-class identity. Its regularity proclaimed economic security. Its complexity demonstrated the wife's managerial skill, even if executed by a cook. Its etiquette inculcated and displayed the family's grasp of the social codes that separated them from those below. Every bite was an act of belonging, a chewing over of one's own hard-won place in the world. The middle-class table was thus a fortress of routine and a stage for respectability, where food, meticulously timed and properly presented, was the primary script in the endless play of becoming and being seen as gentlefolk. To step from the world of the perpetual soup pot into the dining room of a great aristocratic house was not merely to change location, but to cross into a different realm of physics and meaning. Here, food ceased to be about sustenance altogether. It became a spectacle of power, a theatre of excess where the very laws of scarcity were triumphantly defied. A formal dinner was not a meal. It was a campaign, a calculated display designed to overwhelm the senses, cement alliances, and draw a line in the sand of satin and damask that none could mistake. The setting itself was a weapon of intimidation. The long table, a lake of polished mahogany, reflected the light of 100 wax candles and crystal chandeliers and gilded sconces. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax, hothouse flowers, and the coming richness. Each place was a landscape of precision, a battalion of glistening glasses for different wines, a fan of heavy silver cutlery, crested porcelain plates laid upon plates. Liveried footmen stood as silent as statues against the walls, their very stillness amplifying the grandeur. This was not a room for eating, it was a temple for consumption, and the ritual was about to begin. The menu was a document of conquest, a culinary map of the empire. It began with oysters, brought live from coastal beds and opened moments before serving. Then, a parade of dishes that seemed to mock the very idea of sufficiency. A clear turtle soup, its essence distilled from rare imported creatures. Poached turbot, a massive delicate flatfish, served on a silver platter with elaborate shrimp and lobster sauces. Next, the pièce de résistance, perhaps a baron of beef, an entire double sirloin roasted to a crackling mahogany hue, carried in by 2 footmen, or a whole roast peacock, its feathers reattached in a dazzling inedible display. Around these central altars to protein were arranged satellites of the exotic, dishes of truffles from Perigord, asparagus forced in special beds, salads dressed with oil pressed from foreign olives. The service was à la française, meaning all dishes for a course were presented simultaneously, covering the table in a breathtaking, chaotic abundance. A guest faced not a plate of food, but a panorama of it. The purpose was choice, yes, but more so, it was the induction of a pleasurable helplessness. How could one possibly taste everything? The excess was the point. It communicated a simple, brutal truth. Asterisk. We have so much, we cannot possibly consume it all. As the courses progressed, the game birds, pheasant, grouse, the sweet soufflés and flaming puddings, the final dessert course of iced fruits, nuts and sweetmeats, arranged in elaborate pyramids, the initial awe turned to a kind of stupefied discomfort. Stomachs, however expansive, reached their limit long before the kitchen's ambition did. The contrast with the simmering single pot of the poor was absolute, and intentionally so. Where the poor's soup was a symbol of austerest continuity asterisk, never empty, ever evolving, the aristocratic feast was a spectacle of finality. Dishes were created, presented, and then swept away. Their purpose served the moment they elicited a gasp or a compliment. The pot used every scrap. The feast was defined by its asterisk, asterisk, waste, asterisk, asterisk. Perfectly edible food was removed barely touched, destined for the servants' hall, then perhaps the pigs, then the midden. The beef bone that would have been boiled for a week in a worker's home was here discarded without a thought. This waste was not careless. It was eloquent. It was the most visible proof that the owners of this food existed beyond the economy of need. Their relationship to nourishment was not biological, but political and aesthetic. The rituals surrounding the feast further deepened the chasm. The strict order of seating by rank, the complex language of the tableware, the specific wines paired with each course, the rule that one must never speak of business or politics at the table, all of this transformed eating into a complex social cipher. Mastery of this code proved one's breeding, one's right to be there. It was a social test as much as a gastronomic event. For the poor, eating was a private, often hurried, act of fuel replenishment. Here, it was a profoundly public performance of one's place in a rigid hierarchy. Every sip, every bite was observed and judged. In this dazzling, oppressive room, food performed its ultimate social function, not to bridge, but to divide. The sheer, breathtaking cost of the meal, the imported ingredients, the army of chefs and servants, the priceless plate, was a fortress wall. The aroma of truffle and roasting game was the perfume of exclusion. The spectacle was a constant, unspoken reminder. The world that required a mother to plead for a knucklebone was the same world that allowed a lord to send back a perfectly cooked saddle of lamb because the mint sauce was a shade too pale. The aristocratic feast was the apex of food as power, a deliberate and lavish performance of inequality meant to be admired, envied, and ultimately accepted as the natural order. It was the stomach of the empire on display, gorged, triumphant, and utterly divorced from the grinding hunger that fueled its engines. The most common and lawful bounty was wild greens, asterisk, asterisk, nettles, asterisk, asterisk, were a prized if punishing find. Gathered with thick gloves or a deft hand that grasped the stem without brushing the leaves, they were carried home to be transformed. Boiled vigorously, their stinging hairs melted away, leaving a dark green, spinach-like vegetable that could be stirred into the soup pot, adding a flash of colour and a valuable dose of iron and vitamins. Asterisk, asterisk, dandelion, asterisk, asterisk, leaves, picked young before the flowers bloomed, added a bitter, pungent note to a salad of stale breadcrumbs and vinegar. Asterisk, asterisk, chickweed, asterisk, asterisk, and asterisk, asterisk. Sorrel, asterisk, asterisk, might be found in damp corners. This knowledge, often passed down from rural grandparents, was a vital inheritance. It represented a thread of self-reliance, a way to add nutrition and variety without spending a farthing. The act of gathering them, bent double in a vacant lot while the soot settled on your back, was a quiet, solitary rebellion against the absolute power of the marketplace. Far more dangerous was the act of asterisk, asterisk, poaching, asterisk, asterisk. This was not the romantic image of a lone hunter in a nobleman's forest, but a tense, furtive activity in the green spaces clinging to the city's periphery. The target might be a rabbit in a cemetery, a pigeon from a public square, or fish from a private stretch of river or an ornamental lake. The risks were extreme. Getting caught meant not just a fine, which was ruinous, but likely imprisonment or transportation. The act was one of calculated, terrifying risk. Yet the siren call of fresh, substantial protein was powerful. A single rabbit could mean a feast, its bones enriching the pot for days. Poaching was a collective secret in some neighbourhoods, a network of lookouts and silent exchanges. The meat, when it appeared, was never questioned. It was eaten quickly behind closed doors, the evidence destroyed. It was food tinged with adrenaline and shame, a testament to how the hunger for a full stomach could override the fear of the law and the ingrained respect for property. It was a direct illegal raid on the resources that the geography of wealth had reserved for itself. The body of the Victorian poor was not just tired or thin, it was a living document, its very flesh and bone inscribed with the grim ledger of its diet. The consequences of the perpetual grinding scarcity manifested not as a single dramatic illness, but as a constellation of chronic, debilitating conditions that marked a person, and especially a child, for life. This was malnutrition not as an event, but as an environment, a physiological landscape in which the human form was subtly and cruelly reshaped. For children, the most visible and heartbreaking signature was **rickets***. This was a disease of absence, specifically the absence of vitamin D and calcium, nutrients crucial for building strong bones. Vitamin D came from sunlight on the skin and from fatty fish, eggs, and dairy, all rarities in the smoke-choked, indoors-focused life of the slums. Calcium came from milk and cheese, costly luxuries. The result was a softening of the growing bones. A toddler's legs, tasked with bearing weight, would slowly bow outwards under the strain, creating the painful, waddling gait that became a common sight in poor districts. The wrists and ankles swelled into bony knobs. The rib cage could become deformed, and the spine might curve. These children were not just small, they were architecturally compromised. Their bodies were literally bending under the weight of a diet dominated by phytate-rich, calcium-blocking coarse bread and devoid of the necessary building blocks for structural integrity. A rickety child was a walking indictment of an economy that could not, or would not, provide its most vulnerable with the basics for skeletal growth. Inside, a different kind of erosion was taking place. Anemia, the bloodlessness, was a constant sapping companion for men, women, and children alike. Its primary cause was a lack of iron, the mineral that gives blood its oxygen-carrying power. Iron came from red meat and green leafy vegetables. The poor ate meat rarely, and the wild greens they foraged, while helpful, were insufficient to counter the deficit. The body, starved of iron, could not produce enough healthy red blood cells. The symptoms were a portrait of life drained of its vitality, a pervasive, unshakable fatigue that made every task a mountain, a pallor that turned the skin and the inside of the eyelids a sickly, translucent white, breathlessness from the slightest exertion as the body struggled to oxygenate itself, dizzy spells and a constant hollow feeling of cold. This was not simple tiredness from long hours. It was a cellular exhaustion, a profound biological slowing down that made concentration difficult and despair easy. The anemic worker was not just poor, he was physically incapable of the vigorous labour that might lift him from poverty, trapping him in a cycle of inefficiency and enervation. On the docks and among sailors, but also striking the utterly destitute in cities, scurvy could appear. A brutal disease of pure vitamin C deficiency. Vitamin C, which prevents the breakdown of collagen, the body's connective tissue, is abundant in fresh fruits and vegetables. In a diet of bread, potatoes, and boiled, days-old scraps, it was virtually absent. The onset was deceptively simple: lethargy and sore limbs. Then the body began to dismantle itself. The gums would swell, turn spongy and purple, and bleed profusely. Teeth loosened and fell out. Old wounds reopened, the skin bruised from the slightest touch, blossoming into livid purple patches as capillaries burst beneath the surface. The victim would become weak, racked with pain, and succumb to infections their immune system could no longer fight. Scurvy was a particularly vicious mockery, as the cure, a lemon, an orange, a handful of fresh greens, was simple, yet entirely out of reach within the economic and dietary confines of poverty. It showed how the body, when denied a single specific nutrient found in fresh food, could unravel in the most grotesque and preventable way. Underlying all these specific ailments was the quiet, omnipresent reality of stunted growth and development ***. This was the grand, silent summation of the caloric and protein deficit. children of the labouring classes were consistently, measurably shorter and lighter than their wealthier counterparts. Their bodies, perpetually in energy conservation mode, diverted all resources to maintaining basic functions, leaving little for growth. They reached puberty later. Their frames remained slight, their muscles underdeveloped. This was not a genetic trait, it was a physiological adaptation to chronic hunger. A population of smaller, lighter people was the direct biological imprint of a social system. Their diminished stature was a fossil record of meals missed, of bones overboiled for broth, of plates dominated by starch, and of bellies filled with tea instead of milk. This stunting was a theft of potential, a guarantee that the next generation would enter the workforce already bearing the physical limitations imposed by the last. The body, in its silent language of inches and pounds, was telling the story that ledgers and sermons ignored. It was a story of systemic hunger, written in the very bone and sinew of a people. The true, brutal test of the diet came not in the quiet hunger of the morning, but in the roaring, physical crucible of the workday. Take the figure of a dock labourer. Call him John. He left his room with a taste of weak tea and stale bread in his mouth. Perhaps 300 calories already burning in his veins. By 10 in the morning that fuel was gone, metabolized into the sheer physics of his labour, the heft of a 100-pound sack of grain onto his shoulder, the strain of muscles as he rolled a cask of rum, the constant jarring impact of his boots on the stone quay. His body, a furnace built for hard combustion, was now running on fumes. The sensation that crept up on him was not mere hunger pangs, it was a systemic shutdown. First came the lightheadedness. As he straightened up from lifting, the world would tilt slightly, a grey haze swimming at the edges of his vision for a second before it righted itself. Then, a deep trembling weakness in the limbs. His arms, which had felt strong an hour ago, now seemed like foreign, heavy objects he had to will into motion. The sack felt twice as heavy. Each step required conscious effort. His mind, dulled by the body's diversion of energy to sheer survival, would narrow to a single desperate focus. The next break, the possibility of food. This cognitive fog bred a raw, prickling irritability. The shouted orders from the foreman grated. A clumsy bump from a fellow worker could spark a flash of rage that was at its core the fury of a biological system pushed to the brink. He was becoming a less efficient, more dangerous machine. His reaction slowed, his judgment clouded by a primal gnawing need. This midday crisis created a perverse economic trap. If John had the penny or tuppence to spare, he might spend it at a dockside stall on a hot pie or a mug of thick soup. This was calories purchased at a premium, money that would not make it home to his family's collective pot. It was a direct diversion from the household budget, a personal bailout for his failing body. If he didn't have the coin, he had to endure, his productivity plummeting. A weaker, dizzier man was more likely to drop a valuable cargo, to have an accident, to be passed over for work the next day by a foreman who saw his faltering strength. His low wages, which dictated the family's poor diet, were now further reduced by the very physical consequences of that diet. It was a perfect vicious cycle. Asterisk, asterisk, poverty, poor diet, low energy, reduced productivity, lower wages, deepen poverty. Asterisk, asterisk. The factory worker faced the same physics in a different hell. The constant standing, the fine motor skills needed to tend machines, the mental vigilance to avoid injury, all these cognitive and physical tasks drained glucose from the blood. The cotton dust in the air inflamed the lungs, making oxygen intake less efficient, compounding the fatigue. By the afternoon, her hands might shake slightly as she reached for a broken thread. Her concentration would flicker, a moment's lapse that could mean a spoiled batch of yarn and a docked wage. The factory bell for the dinner break was not a welcome sound. It was the line past which her body warned it could not go without fuel. The meagre meal she had brought, bread and a scrap of cheese perhaps, was a pit stop, a handful of sand thrown into a gearbox screaming from friction. It was enough to numb the worst of the tremors, to push the grey mist back from her vision for another few hours, but never enough to restore her to true capacity. But its true genius lay in its afterlife. The Sunday joint was not a one-time event. It was the launch pad for the next 3 days. Monday, was cold meat day. The leftover slices, now grey and firm, were served with pickles, a crucial preservative and flavour bringer, and more bread. The fat congealed on the meat, offering a different, still welcome richness. Tuesday, saw the final transformation. The now denuded bone, with all its clinging fragments of gristle and connective tissue, was returned to the pot. It joined onions, barley, and whatever root vegetables remained to be boiled into a broth that was substantially more robust and meaty than the usual fare. The last vestiges of flavour and nutrition were literally boiled out of the skeleton. By Wednesday, the ghost was gone. The pot returned to its baseline state, and the memory of the Sunday meat became a beacon getting fainter as the week stretched on. This cycle of the joint, roast, cold, broth, was a masterpiece of culinary economy, a lesson in extracting maximum value from a single precious investment. It stood in stark, almost cruel contrast to the wealthier household, where a roast might be eaten once, the leftovers given to servants, and the bone discarded without a second thought. For the poor, the bone was not waste. It was a second and third meal, a promise and a memory, the dry, hard proof that for one day, however briefly, they had eaten well. The city, for all its brick and smoke and iron, was not entirely barren. On its fringes, where the cobblestones gave way to rubbish-strewn ditches, along the banks of the polluted rivers, in the neglected churchyards and patches of waste ground between factories, a different kind of market existed. This was the forageable landscape of the desperate, a living larder that demanded no coin, only knowledge, effort, and a suspension of dignity. Here, the search for food became a direct physical dialogue with a dwindling nature. This chronic energy deficit defined the tempo of working-class life. It meant the most demanding physical labour was conducted in a state of persistent recovery, never peak strength. It stole the mental bandwidth for learning new skills, for planning, for anything beyond the moment-to-moment struggle to continue. The body's constant plea for energy became the background noise of existence, a biological reality that shaped temperament, limited opportunity, and locked individuals into the very economic conditions that created the hunger in the first place. Their empty stomachs were not just a personal suffering, they were the engine of an economic trap, ensuring that the energy needed to climb out of poverty was systematically consumed by the daily act of not falling deeper into it. The real battle for survival was not fought on the docks or in the factory aisles, but in the quiet, desperate calculus conducted every Friday night or Saturday morning in 1,000 rented rooms. This was the domain of the wife and mother, call her Mary, and her weapons were a handful of greasy coins, a frayed notebook, and a memory etched with the prices of everything. When her husband placed the week's wages on the table, it was not income. It was a finite, pitifully small military budget for a 7-day campaign against hunger. The moment the coins clinked down, the ledger in her mind sprang open. The fixed charges came first, a brutal subtraction. Rent, the implacable tyrant, took its huge bite. Coal for the fire, and a penny for the gas jet, maybe a payment on the pawned flat iron. What remained was the food allowance, the final, fragile sum upon which all life and morale depended. Now, the agonizing algebra began. It was never about what they wanted, but about what systems of energy and morale could be sustained. Asterisk. The tea and sugar asterisk were the first line item. They were non-negotiable. Tea was the mortar that held the family's spirits together. Sugar was the fleeting sweetness that made the greyness bearable. To cut these was to invite a despair more dangerous than a slight hunger. But how much? An ounce less of tea might mean a weaker, more bitter brew that failed to comfort. A smaller cone of sugar might mean the children's tea went unsweetened, their one small joy diminished. She would calculate to the quarter ounce. Then the asterisk bread asterisk. She knew exactly how many 4-pound loaves her family consumed. Could she risk buying a half loaf less, stretching the existing one with extra soup? That risked mutiny and left her men weak for work. The asterisk bacon asterisk was the great variable. A full pound was a dream. 8 ounces provided a few precious rashers for flavouring and a little dripping. 4 ounces was a crisis ration, a flavouring agent only. The decision hinged on everything else. A cheaper cut of meat for Sunday, doing without butter entirely. Her role was that of a triage nurse and a quartermaster. Asterisk. The children needed milk asterisk for strength and growth, but milk was dear. A pint a day for the youngest might be possible, but it meant forgoing an extra quarter pound of bacon or 2 ounces of cheese for her husband's lunch. Her husband asterisk needed beer asterisk, not for pleasure, but as a legitimate source of calories and a social necessity with his workmates. Denying him his pint could cause resentment that poisoned the home. Her own needs came last, always. A scrap of cheese for his midday piece, a herring for the pot. Each choice was a domino. Choosing the herring meant less fat for frying. Choosing the cheese meant less milk for the children. She was balancing physical nutrition against psychological fortitude, immediate energy against long-term health, her husband's capacity to labour against her children's capacity to grow. She shopped with the focused intensity of a spy on a mission. The market was a gauntlet of temptation and humiliation. She knew which butcher would throw in a soup bone for free with a purchase, which grocer's weights were honest, which stallholder sold slightly wilted vegetables at a farthing less. She bought in minute quantities, a pennyworth of bacon, 2 ounces of tea, a single egg. Her purchases were a portrait of her precarity. She deferred to the judgment of no one, her fingers testing the firmness of a potato, her eyes assessing the fat on a bacon strip. She haggled not with aggression, but with a weary, practised persistence that spoke of infinite need. "Throw in that bit of parsley, sir. It's fading," she might say. Or, "A halfpenny off for the crack in that bowl." Every transaction was a tiny victory or a small defeat in the weekly war. Returning home, her basket was not heavy with abundance, but precisely weighted with the outcome of 100-minute decisions. The coins left in her pocket were as important as the food. They were the buffer for disaster, the fund for when a child fell sick and needed a penny for a mineral, or when her husband's boots finally gave out. To be a poor man's wife was to be the family's economist, its nutritionist, its psychologist, and its quartermaster, fighting a silent, endless battle where the territory was the stomach, the currency was the penny, and defeat was measured not in surrendered land, but in the hollow eyes of her own children. The marketplace was not a place of plenty, but a cacophonous, pungent battlefield of negotiation and discernment. Stepping into its midst was an assault on the senses, the ripe smell of overripe fruit and fresh manure, the raw tang of blood from the butcher's block, the shrill cries of hawkers, the low rumble of 100 competing conversations, the clatter of carts over cobbles. For the poor housewife, it was a field of both opportunity and peril, requiring a specific hard-won intelligence. She moved with a purposeful, sceptical air, her eyes missing nothing. Her first tool was asterisk, selective vision asterisk. She ignored the bright, perfect pyramids of produce on the front of stalls meant for the well-off. Her gaze went to the back, to the baskets where slightly bruised apples, split cabbages, and yesterday's wilted greens were sold at half the price. She knew a brown spot on a potato could be cut away, and that limp carrots would revive in a stew. Her second skill was asterisk, forensic assessment asterisk. Every purchase was an investigation. At the baker's she would heft the loaf, judging its weight against the promised £4, her fingers probing for the telltale damp heaviness of excess potato filler. At the tea merchant's she would scrutinise the dark dust for the unnatural blue tinge of Prussian blue dye, used to mask inferior leaves. She would smell the butter for rancidity, pinch the bacon to feel the ratio of fat to lean. She was on constant guard against the alum in flour, the plaster in sugar, the watered milk. This knowledge was communal, passed in whispers between women. Which chandler sold sanded pepper, which brewer watered his beer. To be cheated was not just a financial loss, it was a theft of precious nutrition, a betrayal that could mean an emptier pot. Her most vital art was the asterisk negotiation of poverty itself. Asterisk. She mastered the language of the small purchase. A ha'porth of bacon ends, missus. 2 pennyworth of pieces at the butcher's, meaning the scraps of meat and gristle. She knew how to ask, without words, for credit, a practice called tick or the slate. With a familiar vendor, she might secure a small amount of food on Saturday, promising payment from her husband's next wage. It bound her to that seller and came with a hidden premium of obligation, but it was a lifeline. Her ultimate leverage was her own visible need. A well-placed sigh, a glance at her thin children, a resigned turn away from an item just beyond her means. These were performances designed to elicit a sliver of mercy, an extra potato tossed into the bag, a bone offered for free. Every transaction was a high-wire act between assertiveness and supplication, a daily exercise in preserving both her dignity and her family's dinner. The market was where the abstract cruelty of the economy became personal, tangible, and where her resilience was forged in the gritty, unglamorous arena of the halfpenny and the ounce. Back within the 4 walls of her kitchen, the war entered its second alchemical phase. Here, the scant, often poor-quality purchases were subjected to a series of transformations designed to defy their own limitations. This was asterisk, culinary necromancy, raising more from less through patience, ingenuity, and outright deception. The goal was twofold: to extend quantity and to disguise deficiency. The asterisk extension of the meat asterisk was a primary sacrament. A single pound of cheap fatty minced beef was not formed into patties, it was stretched into a universe. First, a handful of stale breadcrumbs soaked in water and squeezed dry would be kneaded into the meat, adding bulk and absorbing precious fats. Grated raw potato, another excellent filler that bound the mixture, would be added. An onion, finely diced, provided flavour and volume. This amalgam might be pressed into a pan to bake as a meat cake, where the thin layer of browned meat on top gave the illusion of substance to a slice that was mostly bread and potato. Alternatively, it would be rolled into small balls and simmered in the eternal soup, where they swelled and absorbed the broth, becoming hearty-looking but far from pure meat dumplings. Nothing was wasted. The fatty water left from boiling bacon was saved to cook potatoes or cabbage, instilling a smoky taste. The crumbly, rendered-down bits left in the pan after frying, called scratchings, were used as a flavourful topping for bread. Yet this convenience came laced with danger. The asterisk penny poison asterisk was not just a joke. Hygiene was non-existent. Pies might be made from tainted meat, recycled from unsold stock. Flies swarmed over uncovered trays of cakes. The water used to boil shellfish or make jellies was often drawn from the same polluted rivers that carried the city's waste. The vendors themselves, often as poor and desperate as their customers, operated with no oversight. Eating from a street stall was a gamble. The rewards were immediate warmth, taste and energy. The risks were nausea, debilitating diarrhea, the quick step, or even deadly food poisoning like ptomaine. But for the poor the calculus was simple. The certain gnawing discomfort of hunger now was worse than the potential, if grave, risk of sickness later. The street fed them quickly and cheaply, and in the urgent economy of survival, that was a bargain many were forced daily to make. All the careful algebra, The market haggling, the kitchen alchemy. It was a magnificent, desperate castle built on a foundation of sheer luck. The luck that the dock foreman called your husband's name, that the factory bell rang for you each day, that no feverish cough took root in a child's chest. When that luck shattered, the castle collapsed with terrifying speed, and the fall was measured in the emptying of the pot. The crisis began with a terrible quiet. The husband's place at the table was empty, not because he was at work, but because there was none. An injury, a wrenched back from a slipped load, a hand mangled by a machine, or simple lack of work in a seasonal slump. The weekly coins ceased to clink on the table. The wife's mental ledger now contained only outgoings, no income. The first stage was a grim retrenchment. The bacon vanished entirely from the calculations. The tea was reboiled until it was little more than tinted water. The eternal soup pot grew transparent. The bone within had long since yielded its last ghost of flavour, and now only a few chunks of turnip and potato swam in a vast sea of greasy water. The bread ration was cut. The children's milk stopped. Meals shrank from 3 to 2, a piece of bread and dripping at noon, a bowl of thin soup at night. The family existed in a state of constant low-grade gnawing, the hunger no longer a periodic visitor but a permanent hollow resident. Then came the liquidation of the home itself. The pot, the very symbol of her alchemy, might be the first to go. Carried to the pawnbroker's shop, the uncle's as it was grimly known, it would fetch a few pence. The good skirt kept for Sundays, the husband's spare shirt, the blanket from the bed. Each transaction was a surgery, the removal of a piece of domestic flesh to buy another day or two of bread. The kitchen, once her command centre, grew barren. Without her pot, cooking became nearly impossible. Meals devolved to the most primitive state. Dry bread, perhaps a raw onion, a scrap of cheese if the pawn ticket had been generous. The fire in the grate grew cold to save coal, leaving the room damp and chill, mirroring the cold despair within. The children grew listless, their eyes large in thinning faces. Arguments, born of fear and shame, crackled in the stale air. The final, public humiliation was the surrender to organised charity. This was the end of strategy, the admission of total defeat. It meant joining the ragged, silent queue outside the parish workhouse gate or a charitable soup kitchen. Here, the last vestiges of dignity were stripped away. You were inspected, often questioned, your worthiness judged by harried officials or pious volunteers. The sustenance offered was a cruel parody of food. The workhouse gruel was legendary. A thin oatmeal-based liquid, so lacking in nutrition it was said a mouse could run across its surface without sinking. In charity kitchens, the soup was often little more than hot water, a few grains of barley, and a shred of carrot designed to stretch donations to cover as many deserving souls as possible. You received your portion in your own battered can, if you had one, or in a borrowed vessel. You ate it standing up, in the street or a barren yard, under the watchful eyes of those who provided it. This was not nourishment, it was a palliative, a minimal caloric input to prevent outright starvation and the civil unrest that might follow. It was food as social control, flavoured with shame and seasoned with condescension. The mother who had once strategized over ounces of tea now held a bowl of warm water. Her skills irrelevant, her role as provider annihilated. The transition from the dignity of her own thin soup to the charity of someone else's thinner gruel was the ultimate measure of collapse. It marked the point where the intricate, personal war of the kitchen was lost, and the family became mere statistics in the vast, impersonal economy of poverty, their fate determined not by their own ingenuity, but by the thin, bitter mercy of the outside world. The queue began in the dark, or at least in the grey, damp gloom that passed for morning. It formed not with conversation, but with a shared heavy silence, a line of shadows against soot-stained brick. These were the men in coats grown thin at the elbows, the women with shawls pulled tight over faces etched with a permanent worry, children who stood too still, their energy conserved. This was the procession to the soup kitchen or the parish relief office, a daily pilgrimage of defeat. The very act of joining the line was a public confession, a branding. You announced to your neighbours, to the street, to yourself, that your own powers had failed. The queue was a social purgatory, a space between the world of the struggling independent and the institutionalised inmate of the workhouse. You were not yet a pauper in law, but you were a supplicant in fact. The wait was an essential part of the ritual, a grinding down of pride before the transaction could occur. It was cold, it often rained, a fine, insistent drizzle that seeped through cloth. You shifted from foot to foot, not to warm yourself, but from a nervous energy born of shame and anticipation. Eyes were kept down, watching the puddles or the worn heels of the person ahead. Conversations, when they happened, were hushed, brittle things, speculations on how thin the soup was last Thursday, warnings about the particularly zealous inspector on duty today. The line inched forward with a sluggish, tortuous rhythm. This was not the brisk queue for a theatre ticket. It was a slow-motion filtration system, separating the truly desperate from the merely hungry, ensuring only those whose need could overpower their dignity would reach the front. Sunday dinner was a sacrament. The fire was built up, not just banked. The joint was roasted or pot-boiled with care, filling the entire dwelling with an aroma so rich, so fundamentally good asterisk, that it felt like a physical benediction. It was the smell of success, of having navigated another week. When it was laid on the table, even on a chipped plate, it commanded reverence. Portions were allocated with a semblance of ceremony. The father, the breadwinner, received the best slice. The children got smaller pieces, their eyes wide. The mother often took the ends or the bits clinging to the bone. For that half hour the grinding calculation ceased. There was hot gravy made from the pan drippings. There might be potatoes roasted in the fat. Conversation was easier, laughter less strained. This was more than a meal. It was a collective exhalation, a performance of normalcy and dignity. It was the family's weekly testament to their own endurance, a fleeting taste of the stability they fought for but could never hold. The satisfaction was profound, but it was always shadowed, even in the chewing, by the knowledge that this was the peak. The descent began tomorrow. The downward spiral was as predictable as the tide. Asterisk, asterisk. Monday. Asterisk, asterisk was the day of memory. The cold joint, now a greyish slab, was brought out. It was served with pickles, the sharp vinegar cutting through the fat, and more bread. It was a good meal, still substantive, direct echo of Sunday's warmth. But it was a ghost, a culinary souvenir. The pleasure was in the remembrance, not the present sensation. The meat was tougher, the fat congealed. By asterisk, asterisk, Tuesday asterisk, asterisk, the ghost had faded further. The now denuded bone, with every last thread of gristle and connective tissue clinging to it, was returned to the pot. It was boiled fiercely with barley, a single onion, and the last of the root vegetables, creating a broth that was the week's final, diluted tribute to the Sunday feast. It was still recognisably meat-flavoured, a hearty soup that felt like a legitimate meal. Asterisk, asterisk. Wednesday, asterisk, asterisk, marked the true return to baseline. The bone, finally empty of all virtue, was discarded. The pot now held only the cheap perpetual staples, potatoes, turnips, maybe a handful of split peas swimming in a thin, greasy liquid. The taste of meat was a memory, a faint rumour on the palate. The bread began to be rationed more strictly. Asterisk, asterisk, Thursday, asterisk, asterisk, and asterisk, asterisk. Friday, asterisk, asterisk, saw a gradual thinning, a qualitative decline. The soup grew more watery as ingredients ran low. The last scrapings of dripping were used. The tea was weaker. Reboiled leaves stretched beyond reason. A sense of tightening anxiety returned, a silent watch on the dwindling stores. Meals became purely functional, fuel to stave off the ache, with no pretense of pleasure or variety. By asterisk, asterisk, Saturday asterisk asterisk. The larder was a wasteland. If the wage was late or the week had held an unexpected expense, a medicine, a broken shoe, the collapse was absolute. The meal might consist of dry bread, dipped in a cup of the faintest, most bitter tea. Perhaps a single boiled potato, shared. The pot held only the hot water used to boil it. This was eating at the frontier of starvation. The children would be quiet, listless. The parents' conversation would die, replaced by a tense listening silence for the footstep that meant the wage had come. The diet had cycled from the celebratory protein of Sunday through the starchy sustenance of midweek, down to the bare, crude carbohydrates of Saturday. It was a perfect, cruel mirror of the financial week, a brief influx of resources followed by a steady, inexorable drain until nothing remained. The food on the table was not just a meal, it was a live, edible chart of the family's economic vitality, fading from robust colour to a desperate pale grey with each passing day. The weekend's fleeting feast was not a solution, but the starting pistol for another 7-day race against emptiness. In the harsh transactional world of Victorian poverty, where food was primarily a fuel for survival, its most profound power often lay in what it symbolised, not what it contained. Beyond the calories and the scant nutrition, the simplest shared meal performed a vital, invisible alchemy. It transformed a collection of exhausted individuals into a family, and a street of strangers into a community. It was the asterisk asterisk ritual of sharing asterisk asterisk, not the substance shared, that wove the social fabric tight enough to withstand the constant strain of want. Within the family, every mealtime, however meagre, was a tiny asterisk asterisk ceremony of belonging asterisk asterisk. The mother's act of ladling out the soup, ensuring each bowl held a piece of turnip, a fragment of potato, was not just distribution, it was an enactment of care and equity. Her gaze, meeting her children's as she passed the bread, was a silent communication. Asterisk, you are seen, you are provided for. The father receiving the best slice of Sunday meat was a recognition of his labour, a reinforcement of his role. The children, waiting their turn, learned the rules of the unit. Deference, patience, the shared fate of the table. The asterisk asterisk shared cup of tea. Asterisk asterisk was the ultimate expression of this. It was almost never drunk alone. The pot was brewed for the household. To pour for another, to sweeten a child's cup with an extra grain of sugar, was a direct transfer of warmth and comfort. It was a pause where the struggle was collectively acknowledged and momentarily set aside. In that silent communion over steaming mugs, resentments could soften, weariness was shared, and a fragile sense of Wiura was reinforced against a world that treated them as anonymous disposable units of labour. The asterisk asterisk, Sunday dinner asterisk asterisk, was the weekly high mass of this social faith. Its significance was vastly disproportionate to its nutritional value. For 1 hour the family performed the parts of a stable, thriving household. They sat together. They ate a recognised, culturally sanctioned meal. They might even converse about something other than sheer necessity. This performance of normalcy was a psychological lifeline. It was a collective defiance against the chaotic, demeaning forces of their daily lives. It said, asterisk, however the world treats us, in this room, on this day, we abide by our own rules of order and respect. The taste of the roast was not just the taste of meat. It was the taste of dignity momentarily reclaimed, of a social contract within the family being honoured and renewed. The memory of that shared satisfaction, the warmth of the gravy, the crackle of the fat, became a cultural touchstone, a story to be told during the bleakness of Wednesday's thin soup, a promise that we had experienced goodness together and might again. The fray. When time was tighter than money, or when a sudden pang of hunger struck, the streets themselves became a moving cafeteria. Victorian street food was a vibrant, chaotic and perilous ecosystem of instant gratification. At every corner and cry, heat and scent battled the city's chill and stench. The *** baked potato man ** stood over his can-like oven, selling floury, steaming potatoes split and dabbed with a salty smear of butter or dripping for a halfpenny. The *** pieman ** offered hot, fist-sized pies of dubious content. Mystery meat, often being euphemistic for a mix of potato, onion, and whatever cheap offal was available. Their gravy scalding hot to hide any off flavours. For the truly adventurous, there was *** jellied eel *** or *** whelks ***, sold from briny barrels, a cheap source of protein with a powerful oceanic tang. The ultimate symbol was the ***, penny gingerbread ***, often moulded into the shape of a man or a heart, its dark, spicy sweetness a burst of pleasure. These foods were engines of convenience. They required no preparation, no cooking fire at home, no utensils. They were *** edible fuel ***, designed to be consumed on the move, in a doorway, or leaning against a wall. For a costermonger who had been up since dawn, hot pie was breakfast. For an errand boy, a baked potato was lunch. They staved off the immediate dizziness of hunger with a direct injection of cheap carbohydrates and fats. Then came the *** examination ***. At the door, or at a trestle table shielded from the weather, sat the gatekeepers. They might be parish officials with ledgers, or well-meaning but morally rigid volunteers from a charitable society. Their role was not merely to distribute, but to *** investigate and judge ***. The questions were a surgical probe into your failure. ***. Where is your husband? Why is he not working? How many children? Are they legitimate? Do you have any other means? Your answers were scrutinized for moral failing. A husband gone to seek work elsewhere could be viewed as desertion. Too many children was evidence of imprudence. The inspector's eyes would roam over your clothing, assessing its quality, judging whether you had pawned enough of your own possessions before daring to ask for theirs. This was the ***, means test of the soul ***. You had to prove not just empty pockets, but a blameless character. You had to perform worthiness, trading your personal history and private grief for a ticket that granted access to a bowl of what lay within. The humiliation was meticulous, designed to make the receipt of aid feel not like a right, but like a stern conditional pardon for the crime of being poor. Finally you reached the source. The *** soup *** itself was the physical manifestation of this conditional mercy. It was served from a vast steaming copper cauldron into your own battered can or a borrowed tin bowl. It was rarely soup as one might imagine. It was a thin, greyish liquid, perhaps with a faint sheen of grease on top, through which a few isolated grains of barley or fragments of potato might be glimpsed, sinking like doomed ships in a vast sea. It was lukewarm, having travelled from a central kitchen. It tasted of little but salt and the faint metallic tang of the pot. It had one function, to create a sensation of warmth in the belly for an hour. It contained almost no nutritional value. This was not food to build strength, but to postpone collapse. The *** bread *** that might accompany it, if provided by the parish, was often the infamous workhouse bread, a damp, dense loaf of the poorest flour, notorious for causing indigestion. To eat it was to feel your body rebel against the very thing meant to save it. The act of consumption was the final stroke. You did not sit at a table. You stepped aside into an alley or a bare yard, and you ate standing, quickly, furtively, like an animal. You did not savour. You ingested. The warmth was a fleeting phantom. As you swallowed the last bland mouthful, the shame, which had been temporarily displaced by the mechanics of eating, rushed back in. You had been fed, but you had also been catalogued, judged, and diminished. The empty bowl or can in your hand felt heavier than when it was full. You carried away a few hundred useless calories and a renewed, crushing sense of your own powerlessness. The charity had addressed the biology of hunger while meticulously starving the human spirit of dignity. It was a transaction that left you alive but lessened, a reminder that in the eyes of the world that fed you, your greatest value lay in your ability to stand quietly in the rain and prove you were deserving of its most contemptuous scraps. If the diet of the poor was a relentless equation, then the weak was its solving, a grim narrative of depletion written in the language of the pot and the loaf. The story began, not with Monday, but with the fragile golden hour of *** Saturday night, or Sunday ***. This was the temporal oasis, the moment when the wage packet, still thick with coins, temporarily suspended the laws of scarcity. The air in the cramped room changed. There was a palpable lightened energy. The mother returned from the market not with the usual pennyworths, but with a small precious parcel wrapped in butcher's paper, the *** Sunday joint ***. It might only be a pound or two of the cheapest cut, brisket, flank, or a scrap end of mutton, but it was *** meat ***. Whole and uncut, a symbol of abundance so potent it felt almost magical. This bonding extended beyond the front door, the *** communal knowledge of the kitchen, which vendor was honest, how to revive stale bread, the secret of stretching a pennyworth of mince, was a currency of sisterhood, traded in whispers at the pump or the market stall. Sharing a recipe was an act of trust and solidarity. The *** street food stall ***, or *** cook shop ***, became a neutral democratic space of communal sustenance. Eating a hot pie on the same corner, standing in the same soup queue, created a silent fellowship of circumstance. You were not alone in your hunger or your strategies to quell it. The shared experience of these humble public meals forged a powerful, unspoken class identity. The food itself might be poor, even dangerous, but the act of consuming it together, of enduring the same conditions, was a powerful social glue. In a society that relentlessly atomized and judged them, these shared rituals of eating, from the intimate tea ritual to the public pie, were the stitches that held the fraying edges of their world together, proving that even when nourishment was scarce, meaning and connection could with immense effort be crafted from the thinnest of broths and the hardest of crusts. So we've walked through that week, from the fleeting Sunday fullness to the Saturday emptiness. We have stood in that soup line, felt the weight of the adulterated loaf, and witnessed the quiet war fought over a pennyworth of bacon. This history can feel distant, a stark black and white photograph of a misery we have outgrown. But before we close the album, we must ask an uncomfortable, necessary question. ***. Is our modern world of cheap, convenient abundance not the direct heir to their world of calculated scarcity? Consider the origins of the very systems that feed us today. The ***, Victorian industrial diet. High in cheap carbohydrates, bread, potatoes, supplemented with minimal animal protein, reliant on stimulants like tea and sugar, was not an accident. It was the most efficient caloric engine to power the human component of the Industrial Revolution. It was about fueling labour at the lowest possible cost. Now, fast forward. The *** modern industrialised food system *** perfected this logic. The cheap, calorie-dense, nutritionally poor foods that line supermarket aisles, the refined white breads, the sugary snacks, the processed meats, are they not the spiritual descendants of the standard loaf and penny pie? Their goal remains strikingly similar: to deliver maximum calories and shelf stability for minimum cost. The cheap food policy that underpins much of modern agriculture and economics can be seen as a grand systemic project to keep the modern workforce fed just well enough to remain productive, just cheaply enough to maximize profit, echoing the exact calculus of the mill owner and the dock company. This leads to the second, more personal question. Asterisk. What is the true nature of our celebrated food choice? The Victorian poor had no choice. Their diet was dictated by the price of bread and the whims of the market. We stand in supermarkets under dazzling arrays of 30 kinds of yoghurt, 100 breakfast cereals, and we feel the zenith of free choice. But is this freedom, or a more sophisticated form of constraint? Our choices are funneled through the same economic and industrial structures born in that earlier age. We choose from options pre-selected for profitability, from global supply chains that rely on modern forms of cheap labour, from marketing that exploits our cravings for fat, sugar and salt. Cravings honed in an evolutionary past but weaponized by a system born from the need to pacify and fuel a population. Our ability to choose an avocado from Mexico or a pre-made meal is a privilege, but it rests upon a historical foundation of asterisk, mass dietary deprivation, asterisk, that created the blueprint for feeding populations at scale and at low cost. Their lack of choice built the machine that now presents us with our illusion of endless choice. Finally, we must ask, asterisk. Have we merely medicalized the consequences they simply endured? They suffered from rickets, scurvy, and anemia, visible physical collapses due to specific nutrient deficiencies. Today, in our abundance, we suffer from epidemics of diabetes, heart disease, and obesity, diseases of overconsumption of the wrong kinds of calories, often stemming from those same cheap processed foodstuffs. The pathologies have flipped from diseases of absence to diseases of toxic presence but the root remains a food system optimized for economic rather than human health. The poverty that once dictated an empty plate now, in a cruel twist, often dictates a full one, filled with the cheapest, most damaging calories available. The legacy of the Victorian poor's hunger is not just in history books, it is in the very DNA of our global food infrastructure. It asks us to look at our own plates, our own grocery bills, our own health crises, and see not just personal choice or failings, but the long shadow of a system built to solve the problem of feeding the masses as cheaply as possible so that other engines of industry, of finance, of growth could run unimpeded. Their struggle was for enough to eat. Our inherited challenge is more complex. To recognise that having enough of the wrong thing, built on a history of denying others enough of the right thing, is not progress, but a continuation of the same story in a different, more insidious chapter. The question they leave us with is not, did you have enough? But, what has your enough cost, and who has borne that price across time? The asterisk disguise of quality asterisk was equally crucial. Cheap, coarsely ground tea, often little more than dust, was subjected to treatments to make it resemble a more respectable brew. A common trick was to add a few dried, blackened currant leaves to the mix, which darkened the liquor. A tiny drop of caramel colouring bought for a farthing could deepen the hue to mimic strength. For those who could afford the spice, a single clove or a fragment of dried orange peel added to the caddy lent a faint exotic aroma that distracted from the tea's essential harshness. Bread when it became too stale to chew, was not discarded. It was grated into raspings for puddings, or soaked in milk or water to form the base for a bread pudding, sweetened with a smear of jam or a drizzle of treacle. Stale cake crumbs could be layered with whatever fruit was available to create a humble tipsy cake, moistened with the dregs of sweet tea. The most profound alchemy was reserved for the bone asterisk. A single knuckle bone, begged or bought for a penny, was not used once. It was boiled for hours on Saturday for the weekend soup. On Sunday it might be scrubbed and reboiled with a handful of barley and a leek for a separate broth. By Monday it would be returned to the main pot, its minerals and gelatin slowly leaching out over days. Only when it literally began to crumble would it be discarded. This relentless extraction was the kitchen's answer to the body's relentless need. Every practice, from the stretching of meat with fillers to the tinting of tea, was a testament not to dishonesty, but to a desperate creative will. It was a science of survival, developed by generations of women who had learned to fight scarcity not with money they didn't have, but with time, knowledge, and an unshakable determination to conjure sustenance from the very brink of nothing. For the working class man, the midday meal was often a choice between a cold wrapped parcel from home and the warm communal refuge of the cook shop, or the working man's cafe ***. These establishments were as far removed from the genteel tea rooms of the middle class as a coal barge is from a yacht. They were bustling, steam-clouded, fragrant caves of necessity. The most common was the penny plate house. For a single penny, a man could receive a bowl of hot, thick soup, peas pudding, kidney bean, or a murky vegetable broth, and a hefty wedge of bread. For 2p, he might get a slice of boiled beef or mutton with potatoes. The food was simple, hearty, and designed to fill a cavity. There was no menu, no choice. You ate what the vast, simmering pot yielded that day, but its value was more than caloric. For the labourer living in cramped multi-occupancy lodgings, the doss house, or for the married man whose wife had no fire to cook a hot midday meal, the cook shop was an essential replacement for the absent hearth. It provided the hot, savoury food his body craved after a morning's manual labour. More importantly, it served as a vital ***, social decompression chamber ***. Here, away from the foreman's eye and the family's needs, he was among his own. The air rang with the clatter of thick crockery, the scrape of benches, and the robust talk of work, horses, and politics. He could laugh loudly, complain freely, and share a moment of camaraderie. In a life of grinding anonymity and powerlessness, this collective breaking of bread or sopping of soup reaffirmed his identity as part of a community, a class. It was a sanctuary of masculine solidarity, a place where the pressures of being a provider could be temporarily set down with his tools. The cook shop didn't just feed the man, it maintained the social networks and mental resilience that allowed him to return to let the final image be held in the mind's eye, split like a diptych. On one side, the grand dining room. The conversation is a low, satisfied hum. A footman, his expression blank as marble, approaches the table. Before him rests the peacock redressed in its iridescent plumage, a masterpiece of culinary vanity. Its breast is untouched, the delicate meat beneath the skin grown cold. No fork has marred its presentation. With white-gloved hands, the footman lifts the vast platter. He turns, and the splendid, uneaten bird is carried from the light of the candles into the shadows of the serving corridor, destined for a dissection in the kitchens, a few choice bits, perhaps for the upper servants, the rest for oblivion. Its purpose, to inspire awe, to signify boundless excess, is gloriously fulfilled. Its value is never in being consumed, but in being displayed and then removed, a perfect symbol of wealth so profound it could afford to treat sustenance as scenery. Now, shift the frame. A cellar dwelling in St. Giles. The single tallow candle throws a guttering light. The meal, a scant spoonful of potato and gravy scraped from the bottom of the shared pot, is long over. A child, perhaps 4 or 5, sits with the tin plate on her lap. Her fingers, small and thin, trace the cold, greased pattern left behind. She brings her fingertip to her mouth, ***, licking the last faint trace of fat and salt *** from the metal. Her eyes are closed in concentration, extracting the final, infinitesimal sensation of nourishment, of flavour from the vessel itself. The plate, now truly empty, reflects the hollow gloom of the room. Here, nothing is too insignificant to be consumed. Every molecule of food energy is hunted down. Value is not in display, but in absolute desperate utilization. These two moments, occurring perhaps within a mile and an eternity of each other, are the alpha and omega of the Victorian world. They define the extreme poles of what food asterisk meant asterisk. In the hall, it was asterisk asterisk power made edible asterisk asterisk, a performance of dominance over nature and men. The untouched peacock proclaimed, asterisk, we command life and spectacle, and we are so secure we need not even eat it. In the cellar, food was asterisk asterisk life itself, quantified to the last smear asterisk asterisk. The licked plate whispered, asterisk existence hangs on this. This was the most fundamental theatre of the age, playing out daily on 1,000 tables and 1,000 bare floors. The distance between the platter and the plate was the true measure of the empire, not in miles of territory, but in the chasm between one human experience and another. The grand feast and the empty lick plate were not just different meals, they were different realities, proof that, in the basest of human needs, the need to eat, society had engineered its most stark and unforgiving hierarchy. We've travelled from the silent, pre-dawn calculations of hunger to the roaring halls of grotesque plenty. This journey through the Victorian stomach is more than a history lesson. It's an invitation to look at our own plates, our own systems, with new eyes. I'm curious about the echoes of this history in your own lives. Asterisk, asterisk. First asterisk, asterisk. Did a parent or grandparent ever pass down a habit, a recipe, or a saying born from a time of scarcity? A secret for stretching meals, a distrust of waste, a particular way of using leftovers? Share those fragments of family wisdom in the comments below. They are living history. Asterisk, asterisk. And second, let's bring it to the present dot, asterisk, asterisk. In your view, what food, drink, or dining experience in asterisk, our asterisk modern world, most starkly symbolises the divide between social classes? Is it the $100 tasting menu versus the dollar store pantry? The organic farmer's market versus the food desert? The workplace lunch ritual? Tell me what you see. Our exploration of hidden Victorian lives continues. Asterisk, asterisk. Next time, we will step into a world of both innocence and exploitation. The world of the Victorian child. Asterisk, asterisk. We'll move from the dinner table to the street and the workshop, examining the toys they cherished, the brutal games they played, and the heavy labour they performed. What was it like to grow up when childhood itself was a luxury few could afford? To make sure you don't miss it, subscribe and ring the bell. For now, as you prepare your next meal, remember the sheer, monumental history embedded in that simple act. The past is not just behind us, it's embedded in our rituals, our tastes, and the very structures that bring food to our tables. Thank you for watching and for thinking deeply. Until next time, keep questioning the world on your plate.